Since China's crackdown on Falun Gong on July 20th, 1999, practitioners have gone to Tiananmen Square to unfurl banners and to proclaim the goodness of Falun Gong. Policemen have responded by chasing, beating, and arresting them. These have become frequent scenes in Tiananmen Square. Some have admired the courage and integrity of these practitioners, but others have asked, why can't they practice at home? Why do they go to Tiananmen Square? The government has outlawed the practice. Why do they have to create a disturbance at this historic national site? Indeed, in Chinese people's hearts, Tiananmen Square is a source of national pride, a solemn and revered place. On the other hand, it is also a trouble place. If it wasn't for all the other avenues being cut off, no one would dare to protest in Tiananmen Square. When the Jiang Zemin regime initiated this unprecedented, large-scale crackdown, Falun Gong practitioners differed widely in their views and responses. Some practitioners were confused by the one-sided government propaganda. Some gave up the practice out of fear, perhaps remembering experiences of the political movements of the past. Some chose to practice secretly at home, fearing the neighbors might find out. Some hid the tape player in the dresser and made a hole in the drawer. Some were afraid their kids might tell others, so they practiced after midnight when no one else was up. But many other practitioners thought they should practice the right way, openly and with dignity. The core principles of Falun Gong are truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Practitioners strive to live according to these universal principles. Under orders from the Jiang Zemin regime, workplaces forced everyone to face a difficult dilemma. If one wrote the guarantee statement of not practicing anymore and still secretly practiced at home, wouldn't that be dishonest and violate the principle of truthfulness? But for those who went to Tiananmen Square to appeal in spite of the government's ban, would that be violating tolerance? The issue of going to Tiananmen Square raised serious questions among practitioners. For those who practiced secretly at home, what had they chosen? Hadn't they passively, though unwillingly, accepted the government's crackdown? And what about those who went to Beijing? Those who went to Beijing to appeal risked losing their jobs, schooling, houses, and pensions. They had to bear the family pressures. This kind of pressure was particularly intense because of the government's policy of implicating the entire family. They had to face the danger of being beaten, arrested, and even losing their lives. The stay-at-home practitioners chose tolerance for the sake of personal safety. Those who stepped out chose to give up personal interests for justice. Which kind of tolerance brings more hardship and suffering? Which is more noble? At detention centers, the police often pressure practitioners who are mothers with this argument. How could you leave your kids behind and go to Beijing? Is it compassionate to make your family suffer? How did the mothers deal with this kind of pressure?
If it weren't for the government's brutal crackdown, no one would have gone to Beijing to appeal. As a mother, it is not easy to make that step. All mothers love their children. But how does one teach a child to live nobly and to defend justice? Knowing that one's mother took great risk to tell the truth, would it be a powerful lesson for a child to grow up with?
Courageous practitioners keep going to Tiananmen Square to defend truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. They clarify the truth, bear the hardships, and have the compassion to be responsible to society, even to those who have been misguided by the government. Actually, during the first few months of the crackdown, no one went to Tiananmen Square to protest. Instead, Falun Gong practitioners observed the restrictions and laws and went to the Appealing Bureau to clarify the truth. However, the National Security Bureau issued a statement of 6 prohibitions, which denied Falun Gong practitioners their constitutional right of appealing. After that, the Appealing Bureau started acting like the Security Bureau. Practitioners were sent to detention centers and escorted back home by the local police. Later, local police forces would arrest practitioners right on the spot. In this way, they would not lose their jobs for failing to control practitioners from their areas. Only under such dire circumstances did practitioners head to Tiananmen Square to protest in public. The police dared to beat people with extreme violence in broad daylight in the square. Behind closed doors, nothing restricted them. Only from the pictures and video footage taken on Tiananmen Square did the people outside China learn about the severity of the persecution. In April 2000, a 50-year-old farmer, Mr. Ten, with only 30 yuan in his pocket, walked 1,000 miles in 26 days from his hometown to Tiananmen Square. He wore out 3 pairs of homemade shoes and endured much hardship along the way. His feet were covered with blisters. The police arrested him. The Chinese government claims people's peaceful appeal is a social disturbance. Even criminals on death row still have the right to speak out. However, Falun Gong practitioners in China are denied that right. For the first time in modern Chinese history, the victims of this repression, the tens of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners, didn't yield to state terrorism and refused to be silenced. In recent history, in the 1950s, tens of thousands of intellectuals were persecuted as right-wing extremists and subjected to injustices for more than 20 years. In the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, only a few people, like Lin Shao and Zhang Zhixing, stood up for the truth under severe circumstances. The tyrants murdered all of them. Following the gunshots in Tiananmen Square on June 4, 1989, a million people's democracy movement was crushed within days. A wise man would avoid immediate confrontation. Those words of wisdom have been passed on in the Chinese culture for thousands of years. For the Falun Gong practitioners who adhere to the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, these words are no longer valid. People value peace and freedom of belief, and society benefits from these ideals. What does Falun Gong practitioners' resistance towards the most vicious government persecution mean to Chinese society? Falun Gong practitioners let go of their fear of death and went, one after another, to protest in Tiananmen Square. For tens of thousands of regular citizens to risk their lives to appeal to the highest authority in the land is unprecedented in 5,000 years of Chinese history. All they want is the freedom to practice and the restoration of the innocence of Falun Gong. Awakened citizens are no longer hesitant, intimidated, or submissive in the face of an evil regime. Aren't they the hope for China? Aren't they the backbone of the nation?